It's Moon Horse Month, so what better way to celebrate than to read a Wikipedia summary of a 120-year-old sci-fi trilogy that's little known outside of Poland. Seriously, I don't have much time to prepare this. Actual horse words will be coming out soon, but probably not until next year. Now, a word of caution. Polish spelling doesn't really make any sense to me, so I'm probably gonna butcher all the names and pronunciations, so just bear with me. Anyway, I'm going to share with you a summary of the Lunar Trilogy, a trilogy of Polish sci-fi novels by the author Jerzy Zulawski, written between 1901 and 1911. The first volume, On the Silver Globe, describes in the form of a diary a story of a marooned expedition of Earth astronauts who find themselves stranded on the moon and founded a colony there. The second volume, The Conqueror, focuses on the colonists' anticipated messiah, another traveler from Earth. The third volume, The Old Earth, describes the visit of two lunar colonists to 27th century Earth. I'm just gonna get right into this. So Volume 1, On the Silver Globe, published in 1903. The initial book of the trilogy, setting forth in first-person narrative the odyssey and subsequent tribulations of a disastrously miscalculated expedition to the moon, with 4 men and 1 woman. As part of the same mission, a second rocket ship with 2 French voyagers, the brothers Remogner, is propelled towards the Silver Globe immediately afterwards. They too are lost, presumably after crashing upon the lunar surface. The reader, however, is only privy to the circumstances surrounding the voyage of the first rocket ship. At the very beginning of the narrative, the project's creator and leader, Irish astronomer O'Tamer, whom the readers of the Chronicle never come to know, is dead as a result of the landing impact. Another member, English physician Thomas Woodbell, succumbs to his injuries soon thereafter, leaving his fiancée Marta, a secret substitute for a German participant who backed out at the last minute, with the 2 remaining men, one of which is Jan Korecki, the Polish narrator. The other voyager, and Korecki's rival for Marta, is the Brazilian-Portuguese engineer Peter Verodol. There is no hope of return or rescue, but there is the possibility of survival on the other Earth-like, though rugged and desolate, side of the moon, which has limited oxygen and water. After the first 2 chapters, Korecki's narrative focuses on the tormented relationship of Marta and Verodol as they produce the first generation of physically stunted children, with the narrator as the heartbroken, increasingly isolated observer and chronicler. The descendants of these space pioneers, whose initial generations are all the product of brother-sister incest, eventually populate the livable part of the planet, calling themselves Selenites. They create a religion based around the coming of a savior who will enable them to fulfill their destiny of someday returning to the planet of their ancestors, Earth. Nearly half a century after his arrival, with Marta and Verodol long gone, the aged, dying Korecki struggles towards the original landing site and, with his final effort, dispatches the chronicle we have just read towards his home planet via the single message missile that was attached to the original rocket ship for just such a purpose. A brief prologue by an unnamed Earth observer, written as part of the plot, opens On the Silver Globe by reminiscing about the expedition 50 years after its departure, discussing the reaction of Earth's inhabitants to the presumed loss of the voyagers, and then describing how Korecki's missile, aimed towards K, likely meant to represent Krakow, where the story was written, observatory, is recovered by an assistant employed there. The charred pages contained within the missile are painstakingly transcribed by the assistant and subsequently presented for consideration by us, the readership of Future Earth. Volume 2, The Conqueror, published 1910. The Conqueror, the longest and most complex of the 3 volumes, takes place centuries after the original voyage. It begins with the landing on the moon of a rocket ship, the first arrival from Earth since the 2 initial expeditions. The new space vehicle, built by scientist Jacek as a much improved prototype for a projected but abandoned second series of lunar expeditions, bears a single unauthorized passenger, Jacek's friend Mark.
Oh, hi, Mark.
An adventurous young space technology planner, whom the physically and spiritually dwarfed Selenite humans hail as their long-awaited savior. Marek, knowing nothing of the Selenites' existence, had merely intended to investigate what happened to the original expedition, then return to Earth. The desperate Selenites, who have developed a crudely organized and unequal but nevertheless functional agricultural society, are on the verge of losing their generations-long struggle against enslavement by the original ruler inhabitants of the moon, the telepathic black-winged devil-like Shurns, who rise up from the hellish bowels of the moon's bottomless caverns. Death and suffering abound. Extremely intelligent and ruthless, and with organs able to produce electric discharges much like an electric eel, the Shurns rule the Selenites with an iron hand and extract from them a tribute in produce, services, and offspring. The Shurns also rape Selenite women to breed human-Shurn hybrids, when the soft white tentacles of a Shurn, hidden beneath its wings, grip and electrically shock a female Selenite. She conceives and bears a diminished, intellectually stunted hybrid being known as a Deathling. Unwaveringly faithful slaves to the Shurns, the Deathlings are treated little better than dogs, and are trained to hate and persecute the Selenites. The Selenites hate the Deathlings even more than the Shurns, and any Selenite woman impregnated by a Shurn is stoned to death. Based on scraps of Christian teaching and stories passed down orally, the Selenites have developed their own belief system, the religion of the coming, centered around the hope that someone will come from Earth to rescue them from their fate. To this end, a religious order maintains a ceaseless vigil at the landing site of the original expedition. When Marek's ship touches down, Jasek had programmed the ship to arrive at the original landing site. He is clamorously received by an overjoyed crowd who are convinced that Marek is their savior and will deliver them from the domination of the Shurns. Marek is brought to the Selenite capital to be received by the head priest, Malahuda. Rather than being overjoyed at Marek's arrival, the wise Malahuda is instead troubled, as he recognizes the potential for societal turmoil and realizes that the religion may not survive if its central founding prophecy is fulfilled. Faced with a choice of declaring Marek to be the Messiah or declaring him to be a false Messiah, Malahuda instead resigns his position, casts off his robes, and enters into retirement. Malahuda's granddaughter falls in love with Marek, while also being terrified by the sacrilegious nature of her feelings towards him. In turn, Marek, treated by the Selenites as a living god, merely considers her affections amusing and pays her little attention, treating her almost as a child. Fueled by a wave of religious fervor, the Selenites storm the Shurn stronghold that rules their territory, which is Ulowski based on Warsaw Citadel, built in the 19th century to bolster Imperial Russian control of occupied Poland. The Shurn and Deathling forces are put to the sword, and only the mind-controlling Lucifer incarnate head Shurn, Alwej, escapes. The injured Alwej hides in the Selenite temple but is captured by Malahuda's granddaughter. Marek resists the popular clamor for Alwej's execution, and instead imprisons him in the temple's sacred crypt, hoping to return to Earth with him as proof of extraterrestrial life once his travails on the moon are complete. Spurred on by their success in conquering the Shurn fortress, the Selenites mobilize a large armed force and, headed by Marek, stealthily cross a lunar sea by night to attack the Shurn homeland. The Shurns are taken by surprise and are killed in their thousands, but strike back. As the war rumbles on and becomes more complex, religious unrest develops in the Selenite capital, with a leading member of the religious order publicly doubting Marek's status as the Messiah and plotting to dethrone him in his absence. The new head priest, Siwan, becomes aware of this and decides to tolerate it so that if Marek fails or the public turns against him, there will be a reserve leader ready to take his place. Doubt and resentment grow further when Marek attempts to reorganize Selenite society along socialist lines, and when he proves unable to bring back to life those who have fallen in the conflict. Selenite religious teachings hold that their savior would be able to raise the dead. Still imprisoned in the temple crypt, Alwej uses his cunning and telepathy to convince Malahuda's granddaughter to release him. During his escape, he fatally electrocutes several Selenites, including Malahuda. But as the war is continuing to go well overall and news from the front is good, the Selenites are largely indifferent to his escape. Marek's forces are gradually thinning, and ammunition for the war with the Selenites is beginning to run short. As the Selenite forces advance into the depths of the Shurn homeland, they encounter massive resistance and only take the capital with great difficulty. Alwej, who has returned to the Shurn capital, again evades capture, seemingly escaping through doors that are locked and barred, defying all reason. The city has unusual properties, and the Selenites are forced to abandon it again. Ultimately, after undergoing unspeakable psychological torment, Marek wins the Battle of Wills and temptation with Awij, thus ending the Shun's evil reign. For Merrick, however, it is a Pyrrhic victory. As the only one who had the ability to conclusively defeat the Shuns, he is the hero of the lengthy war, but, for the first time in the Shun's memory, there is no new threat, and he is now expected to fulfill his role as the Messiah. Having originally flown away to the moon in the aftermath of an unhappy love affair, and having undergone another tragic romance with a Selenite woman, Merrick is exhausted both physically and psychologically. Merrick hears word of the discontent within the Selenite homeland and returns there alone, leaving his second-in-command in charge of the troops. When Merrick reaches the Selenite homeland, he finds the population in open revolt against his attempted reforms, spurred on by the manipulative Sewin, or Sewin, I don't know how to pronounce that. Merrick is also accused of having made a compact with the Shuns, and he is disavowed by a leading religious order who deny the Selenites' extraterrestrial origin and believe they are native to the moon. Facing overthrow, Merrick decides to return to Earth in the ship, but finds it has gone. In the capital, he is forced to face the mounting wrath of the people. After all the sacrifices of the conflict, his hopes for a new society, based upon noble principles, are shattered by disunion in the ranks of the Selenites, and their misplaced mystical faith in his status as the savior. Unable to be the hoped-for Messiah, in the crestfallen Selenites' ultimate desired destiny of EarthQuest, and failing to bring spiritual salvation, Merrick achieves unintended messianic status when, in fulfillment of Awij's dire predictions, he is sacrificed in a manner echoing the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. Volume 3, The Old Earth, published 1911. The final installment, The Old Earth, opens in the period immediately following Merrick's martyrdom, as the various Selenite factions, lacking the unifying focus of the struggle against the Shuns, turn upon each other, initiating a reign of chaos foreboding the end of society. Seeking refuge, two major subsidiary Selenite characters, who provided philosophical commentary upon the events taking place in the Conqueror, hide in Merrick's still usable spacecraft. They are subsequently able to autopilot on its originally intended return voyage towards the now 27th century Earth, where they tour much of the world, finding themselves at the center of mysterious plots and machinations aimed at controlling the fate of humanity. After a turbulent journey through space, the two Selenites land in the Sahara Desert in Egypt. They are both members of the Selenite religious order that believes their race is not descended from humans but originated on the moon, and are referred to as the Master and the Disciple. Finding no evidence of human activity, they assume Earth must be uninhabited, in line with their belief system. But after coming across a high-speed rail line which links Egypt to Europe, and then a Sphinx, they become frightened and shelter overnight in a rock crevice. They are found the next day by a passing Arab trader, who cages them and brings them to Cairo, where he sells them to Mr. Benedictus, a wealthy elderly man who is following a singer, Azza, on her world tour. Benedictus dresses the two Selenites in children's clothing and puts them on a leash, and takes them to Azza's luxury hotel room to present them to her as a novelty gift. Fortunately for the Selenites, they are recognized by Azza's friend Jacek, the scientist who designed Mark's spaceship, who has also come to Cairo for the concert. Upon seeing them, Jacek guesses their lunar origin and is able to communicate with them in Polish. After the concert, where the audience is much more enamored by Azza's looks and sexual attributes than her musicality, Jacek and the two Selenites fly back to Warsaw, a city in the communist United States of Europe, where Jacek is now the chief scientist in charge of telecommunications. When Jacek asks the two Selenites how they came to be in possession of Merrick's ship, the Master lies and tells Jacek that Merrick set them in his ship to get help. The Disciple disapproves of this but does not contradict him. Far from achieving its stated goals of equality, communism in the USE has resulted in the establishment of a rigid class hierarchy in which a small managerial elite enjoys great privilege while the general working population is poorly paid and kept down by the repressive machinery of the state. A liberal revolution is fomenting, and Jacek has discovered a technology that causes individual atoms to explode, releasing vast amounts of destructive energy. Both the communist government and the liberal revolutionaries want to acquire the technology. Although Jacek is part of the wealthy elite, his sympathies are with the revolutionaries. But the authoritarian master steals the technology and gives it to the communist government. The government issues a communique stating that if if revolution breaks out, it will activate the weapon and destroy the entire continent rather than relinquish power. The putative revolution collapses, and the government bans all scientific research and abolishes the teaching of science. Back on the moon, the Shurn leadership has similarly abolished all scientific research and tuition among the Shurns, and has even gone one step further by prohibiting the writing of books. The Grand Shurn alone has the right to place his thoughts on record. Thus, the trilogy ends with anti-intellectual authoritarian regimes consolidating their power both on Earth and on the moon. Well, as you can see, Polish sci-fi is the only thing depressing enough to rival German war movies. The end.